Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stocked the shelves at the small grocery store in downtown Phoenix. The Arizona heat was brutal even at 7 in the morning, and the ancient air conditioning unit wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. She had been working at Miller's Market for 3 years now, ever since she left the military, and the routine had become as familiar as breathing. "Sarah, can you help Mrs. Chen with the heavy boxes in aisle 5, called Tom Miller, the store owner, from behind the counter. "On my way," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had never left her, even in civilian life. She walked with purpose, her movements economical and precise, though most people who saw her simply thought she was an efficient worker. Mrs. Chen was struggling with a case of canned goods that had fallen from the delivery cart. Sarah approached with a gentle smile, the same expression she wore for every customer, every day. "Let me get that for you, Mrs. Chen," Sarah said, effortlessly lifting the heavy case that the elderly woman had been wrestling with. "Are you finding everything you need today?" Mrs. Chen beamed at her. "You're such a sweet girl, Sarah. Always so helpful. My grandson could learn a thing or two from you about respect and hard work." Sarah just nodded politely and continued stocking the shelves. She had heard variations of this conversation hundreds of times. To everyone in the neighborhood, she was just Sarah from the grocery store, quiet, dependable, maybe a little too serious for someone only 28 years old. Nobody knew about her past, and that was exactly how she preferred it. The bell above the door chimed as 3 young men entered the store. Sarah glanced up briefly and immediately catalogued them without seeming to pay attention. Late teens or early 20s, loose clothing that could hide weapons, walking in a formation that suggested they had done this before. Her training kicked in automatically, but she forced herself to remain calm and continue her work. "Yo, old man," one of them called to Tom at the register. "We need some cigarettes and beer." Tom looked up nervously. These weren't regular customers, and something about their demeanor put him on edge. "I'll need to see some ID for the beer and cigarettes," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The leader of the group, a tall kid with tattoos covering his arms, laughed. "ID? Man, do we look like we carry around ID? Just give us what we want and nobody has to get hurt." Sarah continued stocking the shelves, but every muscle in her body had gone on high alert. She could see the entire store in her peripheral vision, knew exactly where each person was standing, and had already identified 3 different exit routes. Her hands continued their methodical work, but her mind was racing through possibilities and contingencies. Tom's voice shook slightly as he responded. "I'm sorry, but I can't sell alcohol or tobacco without proper identification. It's the law." "The law?" The second young man stepped forward, reaching into his jacket. "I'll show you what I think about your law." That was when Sarah saw the flash of metal. Not a gun, but a knife long enough to be deadly, especially in the hands of someone desperate or high. She set down the can she was holding very carefully and turned around slowly. "Gentlemen," she said in the same calm tone she used to ask customers if they needed help finding anything, "maybe I can help you find what you're looking for." The leader looked at her and smirked. "Yeah, lady, you can help by minding your own business and pretending you didn't see anything." "I work here," Sarah said simply. "This is my business." The third young man laughed. "Look at this, guys. The grocery store girl thinks she's tough." He took a step toward her, trying to intimidate her with his size and proximity. Sarah didn't move. She didn't even blink. "I don't think I'm tough," she said quietly. "I know I am." Something in her voice made the young man pause. There was no bravado, no anger, just a statement of fact delivered in the same tone someone might use to mention the weather. But there was something else too, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Whatever, crazy lady," the leader said, turning back to Tom. "Look, old man, this doesn't have to be complicated. We take what we want, you forget you ever saw us, and everybody goes home happy." Tom looked terrified. His hands were shaking as he gripped the edge of the counter. "Please, I have a family. I can't afford any trouble." Then, don't give us any trouble, the second young man said, brandishing the knife more obviously. Open that register and give us everything in it. Sarah moved then, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of backing away or trying to call for help, she walked calmly toward the front of the store, positioning herself between the armed young men and Tom. You gentlemen should leave now, she said, her voice still perfectly calm. This doesn't have to escalate. The leader stared at her in disbelief. Lady, you completely insane? My boy here has a knife, and you're standing there acting like you're in control of this situation. I am in control of this situation, Sarah replied simply. You know what? The leader pulled out his own knife, a switchblade that clicked open with a metallic snap. I'm tired of this crazy lady. Let's show her what happens when people don't mind their own business. Sarah looked at the three young men arranged in front of her, two with knives, one who probably had something hidden in his jacket. Behind her, she could hear Tom's frightened breathing and Mrs. Chen's gasp from aisle 5. The store suddenly felt very quiet except for the hum of the old air conditioner. Last chance, she said, giving them one final opportunity to walk away. Leave now, and we'll forget this ever happened. The leader lunged at her with the knife, aiming for her chest in a wild, untrained attack. Sarah moved like water, flowing aside from the blade's path and capturing his wrist with movements so quick they seemed to happen in slow motion. There was a sharp crack, a scream, and, suddenly, the knife was on the floor and the leader was on his knees with his arm bent at an impossible angle. The second attacker tried to rush her from the side, but Sarah was already moving. She used his own momentum against him, redirecting his charge and sending him crashing into a display of soup cans. The sound was tremendous, metal cans clattering and rolling across the linoleum floor. The third young man finally pulled out what he had been hiding, a small pistol, the kind that was more dangerous to the person holding it than anyone else. His hands were shaking badly as he tried to aim it at Sarah. Stay back, he screamed. Stay back or I'll shoot. Sarah looked at him with something that might have been pity. Son, you don't want to point that gun at me. I'll do it. I swear I'll do it. No, Sarah said quietly, you won't. She moved faster than the young man could follow, faster than anyone in the store could really process. One moment he was holding a gun, and the next moment he was sitting on the floor with empty hands and a very confused expression, wondering how a woman who looked like somebody's sister had just disarmed him without breaking a sweat. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Tom stared at her in shock, his mouth hanging open. Mrs. Chen had emerged from behind the soup cans, her eyes wide with amazement. The three would-be robbers were all on the floor in various states of distress, one holding his broken wrist, one trying to get soup cans off his chest, and one just sitting there looking stunned. Sarah, Tom managed to say, "What? How did you?" "I'll call the police," Sarah said calmly, pulling out her cell phone. "Tom, can you make sure these gentlemen stay comfortable until the officers arrive?" As she dialed 911, she noticed her hands weren't even shaking. This was just another day, another situation to handle. But she also noticed something else. Mrs. Chen was looking at her with a very different expression than usual, and Tom's shock was slowly turning into curiosity. The call to the police was brief and professional. "This is Sarah Martinez at Miller's Market on 5th Street. We've had an attempted robbery. 3 suspects are detained and need medical attention for minor injuries. No weapons were fired. We'll need officers for arrests and EMT for injuries." When she hung up, the store was very quiet except for the groaning from the young men on the floor. "Sarah," Tom said slowly, "I've known you for 3 years. You never mentioned that you knew how to do that." "You never asked," Sarah replied, already beginning to clean up the scattered soup cans. "But where did you learn to fight like that? That was incredible. That was like something out of a movie." Sarah paused in her cleaning and looked at him directly. "I was in the military, Tom. I told you that when I applied for the job." "Yeah, but you said you were a cook or something. You said you worked in the mess hall." "I did work in food service," Sarah said carefully. among other things. Tom was about to ask another question when the police sirens became audible in the distance. Sarah continued cleaning up the soup cans, stacking them neatly as if nothing unusual had happened. But she could feel eyes on her, not just Tom's and Mrs. Chen's, but also the eyes of the 3 young men she had just defeated without breaking a sweat. The police arrived quickly, 2 patrol cars and an ambulance. Sarah met them at the door and gave a clear, concise report of what had happened. She presented the facts without drama or embellishment, the same way she might describe the delivery schedule or inventory problems. Officer Rodriguez, the senior officer on scene, looked around the store at the 3 subdued suspects and, then, back at Sarah. "You said you disarmed all 3 of these individuals by yourself?" "Yes, sir." "And you have no injuries?" "No, sir." Officer Rodriguez looked at his partner, Officer Kim, who was examining the broken wrist of the first attacker. "This guy's wrist is completely shattered," Officer Kim said quietly. "What kind of training do you have?" "Military," Sarah replied simply. "What kind of military training?" Sarah hesitated for just a moment, glancing at Tom and Mrs. Chen, who were listening intently. "I'd prefer not to go into specifics, officer. I served my country, I was honorably discharged, and I defended my workplace and my co-workers. Is there anything else you need to know for your report?" Officer Rodriguez studied her carefully. In his 15 years on the force, he had dealt with plenty of military veterans, and he knew the difference between someone who had seen desk duty and someone who had seen real action. Sarah Martinez clearly fell into the latter category. "We'll need a full statement," he said finally. "But, off the record, thank you for handling this situation. These 3 have been hitting stores all over this area for the past month. We've been looking for them." As the EMTs treated the injured suspects and the police processed the arrest paperwork, word began to spread through the neighborhood. Miller's Market was a central hub of the community, and news traveled fast. By the time the police cars pulled away, there were already a dozen people gathered outside, all wanting to know what had happened. Tom found himself telling and retelling the story, each time with a little more amazement in his voice. "She didn't even look scared," he kept saying. It was like she knew exactly what was going to happen before it happened. Mrs. Chen was even more animated. "I saw the whole thing. That girl, she moved like a dancer, but so fast. And those boys, they thought they were so tough, but she showed them what real strength looks like." Sarah tried to return to her normal work routine, but it was impossible. Every few minutes, someone new would come into the store, not necessarily to buy anything, but to get a look at the girl who fought off 3 armed robbers. By lunchtime, the story had reached social media. Someone had recorded Tom telling the story and posted it online with the caption, "Grocery store worker reveals secret ninja skills." Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times. Sarah tried to ignore the attention, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. People were looking at her differently now, and she could see the questions in their eyes. She had worked so hard to build a quiet, normal life, and, in 30 seconds of action, all of that carefully constructed anonymity had evaporated. Around 2 o'clock, a man in an expensive suit entered the store. He looked completely out of place among the usual customers, too polished, too alert, too interested in Sarah rather than the merchandise. "Excuse me," he said, approaching her with a business card. "Are you Sarah Martinez?" Sarah looked at the card. Marcus Webb, investigative journalist, Phoenix Tribune. Her heart sank. "I don't talk to reporters," she said quietly. "Ms. Martinez, I'm writing a story about today's incident. The police report mentions that you have military training, but it's very vague about the specifics. People are curious about your background." "People will have to stay curious," Sarah replied, continuing to stock shelves. "Ms. Martinez, with respect, 3 armed men attempted to rob this store, and you disarmed them all in under 30 seconds without sustaining any injuries. That suggests a level of training that goes well beyond basic military service." Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at him directly. "Mr. Webb, I was a soldier. I did my job, I served my country, and when I came home, I chose to live a quiet life. That's all there is to know. But surely you can understand why people are interested. A grocery store worker with advanced combat skills isn't something you see every day. Maybe that's because most veterans don't advertise their training, Sarah said. Maybe we just want to be left alone to live normal lives. Webb studied her carefully. He had been an investigative journalist for 12 years, and he had learned to read people. Sarah Martinez was hiding something significant, and her reluctance to discuss her military service only made him more curious. Ms. Martinez, I'm going to research your background whether you cooperate with me or not. Wouldn't you prefer to have some control over how your story is told? Sarah felt a familiar weight settling over her shoulders, the weight of a past that refused to stay buried. Mr. Webb, you're free to research whatever public records you can find. But I won't help you, and I won't comment on anything you discover. After Webb left, Sarah finished her shift in silence. The steady stream of curious visitors had finally died down, but she knew this was just the beginning. The video of Tom telling the story was still spreading online, and now there was a reporter digging into her background. As she walked to her car that evening, Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in almost 2 years. Commander Harrison's office, this is Petty Officer Davis. Davis, this is Sarah Martinez. Is the commander available? There was a pause. Martinez? Sarah Martinez? Jesus, Martinez, where the hell have you been? The commander's been wondering about you for months. Is he available? Sarah repeated. Stand by. A few moments later, a familiar voice came on the line. Martinez, you better have a damn good reason for disappearing on me for 2 years. Sir, I need your advice. I think my cover is about to be blown. The voice on the other end became immediately serious. What happened? Incident at my workplace today. 3 armed suspects, neutralized without casualties. Local police, media interest, investigative journalist asking questions about my background. How much did you have to reveal? Nothing specific, but the performance level was probably enough to raise flags for anyone who knows what to look for. There was a long pause. Martinez, where are you right now? Walking to my car outside my workplace. Go home, pack a bag, and disappear for a few days. Give me time to see how bad the exposure is and what we can do about it. Sir, I like my life here. I don't want to disappear again. Martinez, you know better than anyone that what we want and what we need are. Sarah Martinez packed her small duffel bag with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else in her civilian life. 3 changes of clothes, basic toiletries, her laptop, and a small metal box she kept hidden behind a loose panel in her bedroom wall. The box contained items she hoped never to need again: a passport in a different name, cash in multiple currencies, and a secure phone that connected directly to numbers most people didn't know existed. She was zipping up the bag when her regular cell phone rang. The caller ID showed Tom Miller's name. Sarah? Thank God you answered. Are you okay? I'm fine, Tom. What's wrong? There are more reporters here. And some guy in a suit who says he's from the Department of Defense. They all want to talk to you about what happened today. Sarah closed her eyes and sat down on the edge of her bed. It was happening faster than she had expected. Tom, I'm going to be away for a few days. Family emergency. Can you handle things at the store without me? Of course, but, Sarah, these people seem really serious. The Defense Department guy, he's not like the reporter. He's asking specific questions about your military service. He knows things. What kinds of things? He asked if you had ever mentioned serving in special operations. He asked if you had any unusual scars or tattoos. And, Sarah, he asked if you had ever used the name Elena Vasquez. The phone slipped from Sarah's hand and clattered to the floor. Elena Vasquez. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in almost 3 years. Elena Vasquez was supposed to be dead, killed in a training accident during a classified mission that officially never happened. She picked up the phone with shaking hands. Tom, listen to me carefully. If anyone asks about me, you tell them I was a good employee who kept to herself. That's all you know. Don't speculate, don't guess, and don't try to be helpful. Can you do that for me? Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on? Who is Elena Vasquez? Tom, please. Just trust me on this. After she hung up, Sarah sat staring at the wall for several minutes. Elena Vasquez had been her cover identity for the most classified operations of her naval career. The fact that someone was asking about that name meant that her situation was far more serious than a local news story about a grocery store incident. She opened the metal box and pulled out the secure phone. It had been 3 years since she had used it, but her fingers still remembered the encryption codes. The phone connected to a satellite network that couldn't be traced or monitored by conventional means. Grayston, a voice answered after 2 rings. This is Nomad 7. I need immediate extraction authorization. Nomad 7, this line is supposed to be decommissioned. What's your situation? Cover blown. Multiple agencies making inquiries. Someone mentioned the Elena Vasquez identity. There was a long pause. Nomad 7, hold for authentication. Sarah waited, listening to the electronic hums and clicks that meant her identity was being verified through multiple secure databases. After 2 minutes, a different voice came on the line. Martinez, this is Control. What the hell did you do? Sarah recognized the voice, Colonel James Morrison, her former handler and the man responsible for her transition to civilian life. Sir, I defended civilians from armed attackers. Standard rules of engagement for protection of innocents. Standard rules of engagement don't include using level 5 combat techniques in a grocery store, Martinez. I've seen the security footage. There's security footage. Store camera caught the whole thing. You moved like you were still operational, and you used techniques that are supposed to be classified. We've got people asking questions we can't answer without revealing programs that don't officially exist. Sarah rubbed her forehead. Level 5 techniques were taught only to members of the most elite special operations units, and they were supposed to be used only in war zones under extreme circumstances. Using them to stop a grocery store robbery was like using a cruise missile to swat a fly, effective, but guaranteed to attract the wrong kind of attention. Sir, what are my options? Right now, you have 2 choices. Option 1, we bring you back in, give you a new identity, and relocate you somewhere far away from Phoenix. You disappear completely, just like Elena Vasquez did. And option 2. Option 2 is messier. We let you stay where you are, but we have to create a cover story that explains your skills without revealing the truth. That means lying to federal investigators, falsifying military records, and hoping nobody digs too deep. Sarah walked to her window and looked out at the parking lot of her apartment complex. Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs was helping her grandson with his bike. Mr. Chen was watering the small garden he had planted next to the dumpster. Normal people living normal lives, the kind of life she had been trying to build for herself. Sir, I need time to think about this. Martinez, you don't have time. The DoD investigator asking questions about Elena Vasquez isn't going to wait for you to make up your mind. And if he keeps digging and finds out what Elena Vasquez really was, this becomes a national security issue. What do you mean, what Elena Vasquez really was? Martinez, you know exactly what I mean. Elena Vasquez was the cover identity for Operation Silver Fox. If anyone connects that operation to your grocery store heroics, we have a problem that goes way beyond your desire for a quiet life. Sarah felt the familiar chill that always came when someone mentioned Silver Fox. It had been her last mission, the one that was supposed to end with Elena Vasquez's death and Sarah Martinez's quiet retirement. The fact that someone was asking about Elena meant that mission was somehow still active, still dangerous. Colonel, I thought Silver Fox was completed. I thought all the loose ends were tied up. So did we. But, apparently, someone has been asking questions about Elena Vasquez for the past 6 months. Your little demonstration today might have just given them the lead they've been looking for. Sarah sat down heavily on her bed. Operation Silver Fox had been a deep undercover infiltration of an international arms trafficking network. For 8 months, Elena Vasquez had been a weapons buyer for a fictional criminal organization, working her way up the chain until she had access to the network's leadership. The operation had ended when she had been forced to kill 3 people to maintain her cover, and the psychological evaluation afterward had recommended her immediate retirement from active duty. Sir, who's been asking questions about Elena? That's classified above your current clearance level, Martinez. But I can tell you that it's someone with resources and connections. Someone who knows that Elena Vasquez was more than just another criminal killed in a gang dispute. Sarah opened her laptop and logged into her secure email account, the one she checked once a month out of habit. There were no new messages, but she scrolled back through the old ones, looking for anything that might give her a clue about who could be hunting Elena Vasquez. Colonel, I need you to be straight with me. Am I in physical danger, or just career danger? Martinez, anyone who was involved in Silver Fox is potentially in physical danger. We lost contact with Agent Rodriguez 3 months ago. Agent Kim was killed in what looked like a car accident 2 weeks later. And now someone is asking about Elena Vasquez right after you demonstrate advanced combat skills in a very public way. Sarah's blood ran cold. Rodriguez and Kim had been her backup during the Silver Fox operation. If they were dead, then someone was systematically hunting down everyone who had been involved in the mission. Sir, why wasn't I notified about Rodriguez and Kim? Because Sarah Martinez was supposed to be a completely separate person from Elena Vasquez. Because you were supposed to be living a quiet civilian life where none of this could touch you. Sarah stood up and walked to her window again. The normal suburban scene outside suddenly looked different, more dangerous. Every parked car could be surveillance, every person walking by could be a threat. Colonel, I can't run again. I won't run again. Martinez, be practical. Your cover is blown, you're potentially being hunted by people who killed 2 other agents, and you just demonstrated on camera that you have skills no grocery store worker should possess. Running might be your only option. No, sir. Running means they win. Running means I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, never able to trust anyone or build any kind of real life. What are you proposing? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking through the implications of what she was about to say. I'm proposing that we stop hiding and start hunting. Someone wants to find Elena Vasquez? Let's give them what they want. Martinez, that's extremely dangerous. These people killed 2 trained agents. Colonel, Rodriguez and Kim were good agents, but they weren't expecting trouble. They thought they were safe in their civilian lives, just like I was supposed to be safe in mine. But I know someone is coming for me now, and I know who I really am. That changes the equation. What exactly are you asking for? Reactivation. Temporary, unofficial, with full operational support. Let me draw them out and finish this. There was a long pause. Martinez, you were retired for psychological reasons. The evaluation said you had become too comfortable with violence, that the Elena Vasquez identity had become too real for you. Maybe it did. But right now, that might be exactly what we need. I'll have to run this up the chain. In the meantime, you need to disappear. Go dark for 48 hours while we figure out how to handle this. Sir, going dark means abandoning Tom and Mrs. Chen and everyone else at the store. If these people are looking for me, they might hurt innocent people to get information. Martinez, your job is not to protect every civilian in Phoenix. Your job is to follow orders. With respect, sir, I'm not currently under orders. I'm a civilian who happens to have specialized training and responsibility to protect innocent people. Sarah could hear typing in the background as Colonel Morrison consulted with someone else. After several minutes, he came back on the line. Martinez, we're going to try something unprecedented. We're going to bring you back for a temporary activation, but you're going to stay in place. You're going to continue working at the grocery store, living your civilian life, but with full operational support. What kind of support? Surveillance, backup, intelligence analysis. We're going to turn you into bait, but protected bait. If someone is hunting Elena Vasquez, we're going to let them find her, but on our terms. Sarah felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the feeling she had almost forgotten during her 3 years of civilian life. This was what she had been trained for, what she was good at. Sir, what's my cover story for the media attention? We're working on that. Most likely, we'll say you were military police with some additional training in hand-to-hand combat. Nothing exotic, nothing that suggests special operations. And the Elena Vasquez inquiry. We're going to feed them false information. Make them think Elena Vasquez really is dead, killed in an unrelated operation 6 months ago. That should buy us time to identify who's asking questions and why. Sarah's phone beeped with an incoming text message from an unknown number. Hello, Elena. We need to talk. She stared at the message, her blood turning to ice water. Colonel, I just received a text message addressed to Elena Vasquez. What does it say? Hello, Elena. We need to talk. Martinez, get out of there now. Pack only essentials and move to the safe house. I'm sending you coordinates. No, sir. If they know how to reach me, running won't help. Besides, they want to talk, not to kill me. If they wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. Martinez, that's not how we're going to play this. Sarah's phone beeped again. The grocery store incident was impressive. We have a proposition for you. She read the message aloud to Colonel Morrison. They are recruiting, she said. They don't want to kill Elena Vasquez. They want to hire her. That doesn't make this any less dangerous. No, sir, but it does make it more interesting. And it gives us an opportunity. Sarah walked to her closet and pulled out a black jacket she hadn't worn in 3 years. Hidden in the lining were items Elena Vasquez had carried: lockpicks, a small ceramic knife, a device that could detect electronic surveillance. She had kept them as souvenirs, reminders of a life she thought she had left behind. Colonel, I'm going to respond to the message. Martinez, do not engage without authorization. Sir, with respect, Sarah Martinez takes orders from you. But Elena Vasquez has always been a freelancer. Before Colonel Morrison could respond, Sarah typed a reply to the unknown number. I'm listening. Where and when? The response came immediately. Tonight. Miller's Market. Midnight. Come alone. Sarah smiled for the first time since the grocery store incident. Whoever was Sarah arrived at Miller's Market 3 hours before midnight. She had spent the evening conducting reconnaissance, studying the neighborhood from every angle, identifying potential escape routes and surveillance positions. The skills came back to her like riding a bicycle, muscle memory and trained instincts that 3 years of civilian life hadn't dulled. She entered through the back door using her employee key, moving through the darkened store with the confidence of someone who knew every aisle, every blind spot, every creaking floorboard. The security cameras were still recording, but she had disabled the motion sensors that would alert the monitoring company to after-hours activity. Sarah positioned herself behind the customer service counter, where she had a clear view of both entrances and access to the store's communication system. She had changed clothes since leaving her apartment: dark jeans, boots, and a jacket that concealed the ceramic knife and other items she had retrieved from her closet. Elena Vasquez was armed and ready for business. At 11:47 p.m., she detected movement in the parking lot. A single vehicle, expensive sedan, 2 occupants. They parked under a broken streetlight, professional tradecraft that told her these weren't amateurs. She watched through the window as 2 figures approached the front door, their movements coordinated and careful. The door chimed as they entered, and Sarah could see them clearly for the first time. A man and a woman, both in their 40s, both carrying themselves with the kind of confidence that came from years of dangerous work. The man was tall and lean, with graying hair and scars on his hands that suggested combat experience. The woman was smaller but moved with the predatory grace of someone trained in multiple forms of violence. Elena Vasquez, the woman called out, her voice carrying a slight accent Sarah couldn't immediately identify. I'm here, Sarah replied, stepping into view but keeping the counter between herself and the visitors. You wanted to talk. My name is Katerina Volkov, the woman said. This is my associate, David Chen. We represent certain interested parties who have been following your career with great interest. Sarah noted the names, probably false, but the woman's accent was becoming clearer. Eastern European, possibly Russian. The man had remained silent, but his positioning and alertness suggested he was the muscle while the woman was the negotiator. Which career would that be? Sarah asked. My grocery store career, or my cooking career in the Navy? Katerina smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. We're interested in the career of Elena Vasquez, arms dealer and assassin. The woman who infiltrated the Kozlov network and eliminated 3 key figures before disappearing. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Kozlov network had been the target of Operation Silver Fox, but the details of that mission were supposed to be classified at the highest levels. These people knew far more than they should. Elena Vasquez is dead, Sarah said carefully. She was killed 18 months ago in a gang dispute in Mexico City. Yes, that's what the official reports say. Very convincing paperwork, complete with photographs of the body and witness statements. But we both know that Elena Vasquez was a fictional identity created by the United States Navy for a deep cover operation. David Chen spoke for the first time, his voice flat and professional. We also know that the woman who created Elena Vasquez is currently working in a grocery store in Phoenix under the name Sarah Martinez. Yesterday's demonstration confirmed our suspicions. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but internally she was calculating distances and angles. These people had done their homework, which meant they were either extremely well connected or they had inside information about classified operations. What do you want? She asked. We want to offer you a job, Katerina said. Elena Vasquez was very good at what she did. She was also very expensive and very exclusive in her client base. We represent people who would like to change that. What kind of job? The same kind of work Elena used to do. Infiltration, elimination, acquisition of sensitive materials. But for clients who pay better and ask fewer questions about methods. Sarah realized she was being recruited by the very people she had been hunting during Operation Silver Fox. The Kozlov network hadn't been completely destroyed, it had evolved, adapted, and now they wanted to hire the agent who had been sent to destroy them. Why would you want to hire someone who spent 8 months trying to destroy your organization? Katerina laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Because you were very good at it. You cost us millions of dollars and several valuable associates. But we're not in the business of holding grudges. We're in the business of making money, and Elena Vasquez could make us a great deal of money. And if I'm not interested? David Chen shifted slightly, his hand moving closer to his jacket. Then Elena Vasquez dies for real this time. Along with Sarah Martinez. And probably a few people who have become fond of Sarah Martinez. The threat was clear. Sarah felt the familiar cold focus that always came when someone threatened innocent people. Tom Miller's face flashed through her mind, along with Mrs. Chen and the other customers who had become part of her daily life. That seems counterproductive, Sarah said. Dead employees don't generate revenue. True, Katerina agreed. But they also don't become problems later. We've learned to be very careful about security risks. Sarah was about to respond when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the quiet click of someone else entering through the back door. She had been watching the front entrance, but there was at least one more person in the store now. Friends of yours? She asked, not taking her eyes off Katerina and David. Insurance, Katerina replied. Elena Vasquez has a reputation for being unpredictable. We wanted to make sure this conversation proceeded smoothly. Sarah could hear soft footsteps moving through the store, getting closer. Whoever had entered through the back was good, she could barely detect their movement, and she was listening for it. That suggested professional training, probably military or intelligence background. How many people did you bring to this conversation? Sarah asked. Enough, David said. Sarah smiled, and, for the first time since they had entered the store, Katerina looked uncertain. There was something predatory in that smile, something that reminded her why Elena Vasquez had been so successful and so feared. You know, Sarah said conversationally, the thing about bringing backup to a meeting is that it only works if your backup is better than the person you're meeting with. She moved faster than either of them could follow, vaulting over the counter and rolling behind a display of breakfast cereals just as David drew his weapon. The shot went wide, shattering bottles of olive oil on the shelf behind where she had been standing. From her new position, Sarah had a clear view of the entire store and could track the movement of the third person who was advancing through the aisles. She also had access to something Katerina and David didn't know about: the store's emergency lighting system. Sarah triggered the emergency lights, plunging the store into darkness except for the red exit signs and emergency lighting strips along the floor. In the sudden darkness, she heard confused cursing from David and rapid movement from the third person. Her night vision was excellent, a result of specialized training that had been drilled into her during her special operations career. She could see all three of her opponents clearly while they struggled to adjust to the darkness. The third person was indeed a professional, a woman, moving with tactical precision through the aisles, but she was unfamiliar with the store layout and had to slow down to avoid obstacles. Sarah moved silently through the darkness, using her intimate knowledge of the store to her advantage. She knew exactly where every display, every shelf, every potential cover was located. This was her territory, and she intended to use that advantage. She reached the third attacker first, a tall woman with short hair who was trying to flank Sarah's last known position. Sarah struck from behind, using a chokehold that cut off blood flow to the brain without making any sound. The woman went limp in less than 10 seconds. Maria? Katerina's voice called out softly. Maria, report. Sarah didn't answer, but she moved carefully toward the front of the store where Katerina and David were still trying to locate her. She could see them clearly. David had taken cover behind the checkout counter while Katerina was crouched behind a display of canned goods. Elena, Katerina called out, this doesn't have to be difficult. We're offering you a very generous opportunity. I appreciate the offer, Sarah replied, her voice seeming to come from everywhere at once in the darkness, but I like my current job. She moved again, circling around behind David's position. He was good, his weapon was ready and he was scanning the darkness professionally, but he was looking in the wrong direction. Sarah struck his gun hand with a focused blow that numbed his fingers and sent the weapon skittering across the floor. Before he could react, she had him in an arm lock that left him completely immobilized. David? Katerina's voice was becoming strained. David, respond. David is taking a little nap, Sarah called back. Just like Maria. Would you like to join them, or would you prefer to continue this conversation? There was a long silence. Then, Katerina's voice, much more respectful than before, Elena, perhaps we underestimated your current capabilities. Perhaps you did. Would you be willing to discuss terms under different circumstances? Sarah moved again, positioning herself where she could see Katerina clearly. The woman was still crouched behind the canned goods, but her weapon was lowered and she looked more thoughtful than aggressive. The only terms I'm interested in, Sarah said, the ones where you and your people disappear from Phoenix and never come back. That may not be possible. We have obligations to our clients. Then, I suggest you explain to your clients that Elena Vasquez is retired and Sarah Martinez doesn't appreciate being bothered at work. Katerina stood up slowly, her hands visible and empty. Elena, you don't understand the full situation. The people who killed Agents Rodriguez and Kim aren't working for us. They're working for someone else, someone who has a personal grudge against the Silver Fox operation. Sarah felt a chill. Who? Victor Kozlov's younger brother, Dmitry. Victor was one of the 3 people you killed during your undercover operation. Dmitry has spent the last 2 years tracking down everyone who was involved in his brother's death. And you're working with him. No. We're competitors. Dmitry wants revenge. We want to hire you. But if we can't have Elena Vasquez, we'd prefer that Dmitry doesn't get his revenge either. Sarah processed this information quickly. If Katerina was telling the truth, then Sarah wasn't just dealing with one threat, she was caught between two competing criminal organizations, both of which had reasons to want Elena Vasquez. What are you proposing? A temporary alliance. Help us eliminate Dmitry Kozlov, and we'll withdraw our recruitment offer and leave you alone. And if I refuse, then you'll be fighting a war on two fronts. Dmitry will keep sending assassins until one of them succeeds, and we'll keep trying to recruit or eliminate you until we get a satisfactory resolution. Sarah considered the offer. An alliance with criminals wasn't something she would normally consider, but the alternative was an extended conflict that would inevitably involve innocent people like Tom and Mrs. Chen. I need guarantees, she said. No civilian casualties. No collateral damage. And, when it's over, you disappear completely. Agreed. I also need information. Everything you know about Dmitry Kozlov, his resources, his methods, his current location. That can be arranged. Sarah turned on the regular lights, suddenly illuminating the store and revealing the aftermath of their brief conflict. David was unconscious behind the counter, Maria was still out cold in aisle 3, and Katerina was standing calmly among the scattered cans. There's one more thing, Sarah said. This alliance doesn't make us friends. If the next morning, Sarah arrived at Miller's Market at her usual time, as if nothing had happened. She had spent 3 hours after Katerina left cleaning up evidence of the confrontation and resetting the security systems. To anyone who looked, it appeared that the store had been undisturbed overnight. But Sarah knew that her quiet life was officially over. She had her secure phone hidden in her apron pocket, and every few minutes she received encrypted updates from Colonel Morrison's team. Dmitry Kozlov had been tracked to a luxury hotel in downtown Phoenix, and surveillance indicated he was planning something for that evening. Tom Miller noticed her distraction immediately. Sarah, you seem different today. More alert, if that's possible. Everything okay with your family emergency? Family situations are complicated, Tom. But I should be able to focus on work now. What she didn't tell him was that she was cataloging every customer who entered the store, noting their behavior patterns and identifying potential threats. Elena Vasquez's paranoid instincts had taken over completely, and Sarah Martinez's quiet grocery store world was being viewed through the lens of tactical assessment. At 10:30, Mrs. Chen arrived for her daily shopping, but she was accompanied by a man Sarah had never seen before. He was middle-aged, well-dressed, and moved with the careful attention of someone who was used to being in charge. When Mrs. Chen introduced him as her nephew visiting from Los Angeles, Sarah's training told her he was lying. Mrs. Chen, Sarah said carefully, why don't you show your nephew around the store while I help you with your usual list? As they walked through the aisles, Sarah kept the man in her peripheral vision while talking quietly with Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to trust me. Is this man really your nephew? Mrs. Chen looked confused. Of course he is. Why would you ask such a thing? Because I'm concerned about your safety. This man is not who he says he is. The man had been listening to their conversation while pretending to examine breakfast cereals, and Sarah saw him reach into his jacket. She moved instantly, pushing Mrs. Chen behind a display of soup cans while simultaneously drawing the ceramic knife from her sleeve. Everyone stay calm, the man said in accented English, his hand now clearly holding a small pistol. I'm only here for Elena Vasquez. Several customers in the store began to panic, but Sarah's voice cut through the noise with absolute authority. Everyone exit through the front door now. Walk, don't run. Tom, trigger the emergency alarm. The false nephew smiled coldly. Elena Vasquez, you are more observant than I expected. I am Alexei, and I work for Dmitry Kozlov. My employer would like to meet with you. Tell your employer to make an appointment, Sarah replied, keeping herself between Alexei and the fleeing customers. I'm working right now. I'm afraid Mr. Kozlov is not a patient man. You killed his brother, and he has been waiting 2 years for this conversation. Sarah could see Tom fumbling with the emergency alarm behind the counter, his hands shaking badly. Mrs. Chen was hiding behind the soup cans, completely terrified but trying to stay quiet. The store was nearly empty now except for the three of them. Viktor Kozlov was a criminal who sold weapons to terrorists, Sarah said. I did my job. Viktor was also a father and a son and a brother. Dmitry loved him very much. Then, Dmitry should have talked his brother out of the arms-dealing business. Alexei's expression hardened. You Americans, you think you can kill anyone you want and then hide behind your government and your laws. But some things transcend law. Some things require personal justice. Sarah noted that Alexei was holding his weapon professionally but not optimally. He was trained, but probably more in intimidation than in actual gunfighting. That gave her options, but she was still concerned about Mrs. Chen and Tom. What does Dmitry want? He wants Elena Vasquez to suffer the way his family suffered. He wants you to know what it feels like to lose someone you care about. Sarah's blood turned cold. Mrs. Chen and Tom have nothing to do with Elena Vasquez. No, but they have something to do with Sarah Martinez. And Dmitry has learned that Elena Vasquez cares about Sarah Martinez's friends. That was when Sarah realized the full scope of Dmitry's plan. He wasn't just trying to kill Elena Vasquez, he was trying to torture her by threatening the innocent people she had come to care about. It was psychological warfare designed to break her down before finishing her. Alexei, you're making a mistake. Let these people go, and Elena Vasquez will come with you willingly. Perhaps. But first, Dmitry wants a demonstration. He wants to see Elena Vasquez choose between saving innocent lives and maintaining her cover. Alexei turned his weapon toward Mrs. Chen, and Sarah moved faster than thought. The ceramic knife left her hand in a perfect arc, striking Alexei's gun hand and causing him to drop the weapon. Before he could react, she was on top of him, using a submission hold that left him conscious but completely immobilized. Tom, call the police, she said calmly. Tell them we had an attempted armed robbery. But Tom was staring at her in shock. Sarah, what? How did you? That was incredible. Mrs. Chen emerged from behind the soup cans, also staring at Sarah with wide eyes. That man, he called you Elena. Who is Elena? Sarah realized that her careful separation between her two identities was completely destroyed. Elena Vasquez's skills had just saved Sarah Martinez's friends, but in doing so, she had revealed herself completely. It's complicated, she said, still holding Alexei immobilized. But the important thing is that you're both safe. Alexei spoke through gritted teeth. This changes nothing. Dmitry knows where you work, where you live, who you care about. He will keep coming until Elena Vasquez pays for what she did. Then, maybe it's time for Elena Vasquez to stop running and start hunting. Sarah's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message from Katerina. Dmitry is moving tonight. Warehouse District, Pier 47. Come alone or he kills the hostages. Sarah stared at the message, her heart sinking. What hostages? Alexei smiled despite his pain. Dmitry learned about your military friends. Colonel Morrison and Agent Davis from your old unit. They've been taken, and they will die tonight unless Elena Vasquez comes to face justice. Sarah released Alexei and stepped back, her mind racing. Colonel Morrison and Davis weren't just her former handlers, they were good people who had helped her transition to civilian life. They were also highly trained operatives who wouldn't have been taken easily, which meant Dmitry's resources were more extensive than anyone had realized. Tom, when the police arrive, tell them this man was trying to rob the store and I subdued him. Don't mention Elena Vasquez or anything else, he said. Sarah, where are you going? I have to go save some friends. Sarah, wait, Mrs. Chen called after her. I don't understand what's happening, but I can see you're in danger. Let me call my son, he's a police officer. He can help. Sarah paused at the door. For 3 years, these people had been part of her quiet, normal life. They had treated Sarah Martinez with kindness and respect, never asking questions about her past or demanding more than she was willing to give. Now they were offering to help Elena Vasquez, even though they didn't fully understand what that meant. "Mrs. Chen, thank you. But this is something I have to do alone." "Nobody should have to face danger alone," Tom said. "Sarah, or Elena, or whoever you really are, you've been part of our community for 3 years. Let us help." Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving the military, the sense of belonging to something larger than herself. But she also knew that involving civilians in this conflict would only result in more people getting hurt. "Keep each other safe," she said. "And, if anyone else comes asking about Elena Vasquez or Sarah Martinez, tell them I've left town." Sarah drove to her apartment, knowing it would probably be the last time she would see it. She packed her military gear methodically, tactical vest, night vision equipment, weapons that she had hoped never to use again. Elena Vasquez was going to war, and Sarah Martinez might not survive the battle. Her secure phone rang as she was loading magazines. "Martinez, this is Morrison. Don't listen to whatever demands you've received. Davis and I are trained for situations like this." "Sir, you all right? Where are you?" "We're alive, but that could change quickly." "Martinez, this is obviously a trap designed to draw you out. Don't take the bait." "Sir, with respect, I'm not leaving you and Davis to die because of my past actions." "That's an order, Martinez." "Sir, Elena Vasquez doesn't take orders from anyone." Sarah approached Pier 47 with the patience of a predator. She had spent 2 hours conducting reconnaissance, identifying 12 armed guards positioned around the warehouse, 2 sniper positions on adjacent buildings, and at least 3 different escape routes that Dimitri's people could use. It was a professional setup, which meant Dimitri had learned from his brother's mistakes. Through her night vision scope, she could see into the main warehouse where Colonel Morrison and Agent Davis were being held. Both men were alive but restrained, positioned in the center of the open space where they could be clearly seen from the entrance. It was textbook hostage positioning, designed to force a rescue attempt through a killing zone. Sarah's secure phone buzzed with a message from Katerina, "In position. Dimitri has 18 people total. We can neutralize the external security if you can handle the internal team." Sarah typed back, "No killing unless absolutely necessary. These are American citizens, not enemy combatants." "Understood. Your show, Elena." Sarah smiled grimly. For 3 years, she had been Sarah Martinez, following rules and living quietly. Tonight, she was Elena Vasquez, and Elena made her own rules. She moved like a ghost through the industrial complex, using shadows and abandoned equipment to avoid the perimeter guards. Her first target was the sniper position on the north building, a young man with expensive equipment but amateur positioning. Sarah approached from his blind spot and used a sleeper hold that left him unconscious but unharmed. The second sniper was more professional, but Sarah had the advantage of knowing he was there while he was scanning for threats that might approach from ground level. She rappelled down from the roof access, neutralized him silently, and claimed his position. From the sniper's nest, Sarah had a clear view of the entire warehouse floor. She could see Dimitri Kozlov for the first time, a man in his 30s who looked remarkably like his brother Victor. He was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated, while 6 armed men maintained positions around the perimeter of the warehouse. Sarah activated her throat microphone, connecting to Katerina's communication system. "I count 6 hostiles inside, plus Dimitri. 2 hostages in the center. Are you ready?" "Confirmed. External security neutralized. Moving to backup positions. Remember, no kills unless they shoot first." Sarah shouldered the sniper rifle and aimed carefully at the main power line feeding the warehouse. One shot plunged the entire complex into darkness, except for the emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows throughout the space. She rappelled down from the sniper position and entered the warehouse through a skylight, dropping silently into the maze of shipping containers and industrial equipment that filled the space. Her night vision gave her a decisive advantage over Dimitri's people, who were now struggling to adjust to the darkness. Elena Vasquez. Dimitri's voice echoed through the warehouse. I know you're here. Come out and face me like the killer you are. Sarah moved through the shadows, systematically neutralizing Dimitri's guards one by one. Each takedown was silent and non-lethal, pressure points and sleeper holds that left them unconscious but alive. Within 10 minutes, she had reduced Dimitri's protection force to just 2 men. Your friends are brave, Elena, Dimitri called out, his voice showing the first signs of strain. The colonel especially. He refused to tell me anything about your weaknesses, even when I offered to trade information for his life. Sarah was close enough now to see Morrison and Davis clearly. Both men were alert and tracking movement in the darkness, ready to act when the opportunity presented itself. They were professionals who understood that their job was to stay alive and be ready to help when the rescue came. Elena, Dimitri continued, I'm going to count to 10. If you don't show yourself, I'm going to start shooting your friends. 1, 2, 3. Sarah stepped into the light cast by an emergency fixture, her hands visible and empty. I'm here, Dimitri. Dimitri smiled, a cold expression that reminded her exactly of his brother. At last. The famous Elena Vasquez, killer of my brother, destroyer of my family. Your brother was selling weapons to terrorists, Dimitri. He was responsible for the deaths of innocent people. Victor was a businessman. He sold products to customers who could afford to pay. What they did with those products was not his responsibility. Sarah shook her head. You really believe that? You really think your brother was innocent? I think my brother was murdered by an American assassin who was never held accountable for her crimes. Sarah could see the 2 remaining guards positioning themselves to flank her, but she also noticed something else, subtle movements in the darkness that indicated Katerina's people were in position around the warehouse perimeter. Dimitri, your brother chose his path. I was sent to stop him from selling weapons that would kill American soldiers. I did my job. And now I'm going to do mine. Dimitri raised his weapon, aiming directly at Colonel Morrison. You're going to watch your friends die, Elena. Just like I watched my brother die. No, Sarah said quietly, I'm not. She moved faster than Dimitri could track, diving behind a shipping container as he fired. The shot went wild, and Sarah heard Morrison and Davis rolling away from their positions, using the chaos to break free from their restraints. The 2 remaining guards opened fire, but they were shooting blind in the darkness while Sarah could see them clearly through her night vision. She flanked the first guard, disarmed him with a blow to his elbow, and used his own weapon to provide covering fire for Morrison and Davis. Elena! Dimitri screamed, his voice raw with fury. Face me! Stop hiding and fight me! Sarah emerged from cover, her captured weapon aimed directly at Dimitri. I'm right here. For a moment, they faced each other across the warehouse floor, the arms dealer's brother seeking revenge, and the operative who had been trying to escape her past. Around them, the sound of fighting had died down as Katerina's people finished securing the perimeter. You destroyed everything I cared about, Dimitri said, his weapon shaking in his hands. No, Sarah replied sadly, your brother did that when he chose to become a criminal. I just ended it. Dimitri's finger tightened on the trigger, but Colonel Morrison's voice cut through the tension. Martinez, you have multiple targets incoming from the east entrance. Sarah spun around to see 6 new armed figures entering the warehouse, but these weren't Dimitri's people. They wore tactical gear marked with Cyrillic letters, and they were advancing with military precision toward everyone in the warehouse. Spetsnaz, Morrison said grimly. Russian Special Forces. Katerina's voice crackled over Sarah's throat microphone, Elena, get out of there now. Those aren't criminals, they are state operatives. Sarah realized that this entire situation had just escalated from a personal vendetta to an international incident. The Russian government had sent special forces operators to American soil, probably to eliminate everyone who knew about the Kozlov network's connections to state-sponsored terrorism. Dimitri, she called out, your government just decided you're a liability. Dmitri looked confused until he saw the approaching Spetsnaz operators. His face went white as he realized that he wasn't going to get his revenge, he was going to be eliminated along with everyone else. "Elena," Morrison said urgently, "we need to get out of here before this becomes an international incident." Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of escaping, she moved toward Dmitri. "Come with us. Those operators are here to clean up loose ends, and you're the loosest end of all. Why would you help me? I tried to kill your friends." "Because," Sarah said as she grabbed his arm, "Elena Vasquez may be a killer, but she's not a monster. And Sarah Martinez doesn't leave people to die." The next few minutes were chaos. Sarah, Morrison, Davis, and even Dmitri worked together to fight their way out of the warehouse while Katerina's people engaged the Russian operators. Sarah found herself protecting the man who had been trying to kill her, while using skills she had hoped never to need again. They escaped through the loading dock as explosions erupted throughout the warehouse complex. Sarah's car was waiting where she had left it, but Morrison grabbed her arm before she could get in. "Martinez, this isn't over. Russian special forces on American soil means this goes all the way to the top. There are going to be investigations, congressional hearings, international incidents. Sir, I just want to go back to my grocery store." "That's not going to be possible. Sarah Martinez's quiet life ended tonight." Sarah looked at Dmitri, who was sitting in her back seat looking shell-shocked. "What about him? He'll have to disappear. New identity, federal protection, the full witness protection package. And me?" Morrison studied her carefully. "You have a choice, Martinez. Elena Vasquez can disappear forever, new identity, new life, government protection. Or Sarah Martinez can stay exactly where she is, with the understanding that your cover is blown and your past is public knowledge." Sarah thought about Tom Miller and Mrs. Chen, about the community she had built over 3 years of quiet work. She thought about the difference between Elena Vasquez's violent past and Sarah Martinez's peaceful present. "Sir, I choose to stay. Sarah Martinez has a life in Phoenix, friends who care about her, a job that matters to her. Elena Vasquez was just a cover identity that got out of hand." Morrison smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. The world has enough secret agents, Martinez. But it doesn't have enough people who choose ordinary kindness over extraordinary violence." 3 weeks later, Sarah was back at Miller's Market, stocking shelves and helping customers. The media attention had died down after the official story was released. Former military police officer stops armed robbery, Russian organized crime connection investigated and eliminated by federal agencies. Tom Miller treated her exactly the same as he always had, except for occasionally asking if she needed time off to process everything that happened. Mrs. Chen brought her homemade cookies every Tuesday and never asked about the man who had called her Elena. But Sarah noticed differences in herself. She was more alert, more aware of her surroundings, more confident in her interactions with difficult customers. Elena Vasquez's skills were still there when she needed them, but they served Sarah Martinez's values now. And sometimes, late at night when she was closing the store, Sarah would remember the feeling of moving with perfect precision and absolute confidence through the darkness of that warehouse. Elena Vasquez might be retired, but she would never be completely gone. Sarah had learned that she didn't have to choose between her two identities. She could be both Elena and Sarah, a woman with extraordinary skills who chose to live an ordinary life, ready to protect the people she cared about but preferring to serve them soup and help them find the right breakfast cereal. The grocery store bell chimed as the last customer of the day left, and Sarah turned off the lights with the satisfaction of someone who had found exactly where she belonged. Elena Vasquez had been a cover identity, but Sarah Martinez was real, and she was home. Sarah hung up the phone and finished her preparations. She had been trying to escape her past for 3 years, but the past had finally caught up with her. The question now wasn't whether Elena Vasquez could save Colonel Morrison and Agent Davis, the question was whether anything of Sarah Martinez would survive the process. As she drove toward the warehouse district, Sarah realized that she wasn't just fighting for her friends' lives. She was fighting for the right to choose who she wanted to be: Elena Vasquez, the highly trained killer, or Sarah Martinez, the grocery store worker who had found peace in a simple life. But maybe, Sarah thought as she checked her weapons one final time, she didn't have to choose. Maybe Elena Vasquez's skills could serve Sarah Martinez's values. Maybe the person she had become could incorporate the best of both identities while discarding the worst. The warehouse district was dark and mostly empty, industrial buildings separated by empty lots and broken streetlights. Sarah parked several blocks away and approached Pier 47 on foot, using every stealth technique she had learned during her special operations training. Dmitry Kozlov was waiting for her, and he had brought an army. You betray me, or if I find out you've lied to me about anything, I'll hunt you down and finish what I started with your organization 3 years ago. Katerina smiled, but this time there was genuine respect in her expression. Elena Vasquez really is as dangerous as her reputation suggests. You have no idea, Sarah replied. Hunting Elena Vasquez had just made their first mistake. They had chosen to meet her on her own territory, in a place she knew better than anyone else. They thought they were luring her into a trap, but, actually, they had just walked into one. Colonel, I'll call you after the meeting. Martinez, you are not authorized to. Sarah hung up the phone and turned it off. For 3 years, she had been Sarah Martinez, grocery store worker, living a quiet civilian life. But, tonight, Elena Vasquez was coming out of retirement. 2 different things. Give me 48 hours to assess the situation. Sarah ended the call and sat in her car for a long moment, looking back at Miller's Market. 3 years of careful anonymity, 3 years of building a quiet life, and it could all be gone because she couldn't stand by and watch innocent people get hurt. But, as she started her car and drove toward her small apartment, Sarah realized something else. For the first time in years, she had felt fully alive during those 30 seconds of action. She had forgotten how good it felt to be exactly who she was trained to be, instead of pretending to be someone smaller and safer. The question now was whether Sarah Martinez, grocery store worker, could survive the revelation of who she really was. And, more importantly, whether she even wanted to.